the very strategic partners that they need to do business with and they need to be close to are right here in the region. Beyond these, we've done something rather interesting. We're in our second year now of hosting a global animal health investment forum. So my guess is there are investment forums in Wisconsin throughout the year. We take more of a really sort of sector-specific, cluster-based approach and invite in entrepreneurial or earlier stage companies quite literally from all over the world. And then, of course, engage these major animal health companies from a strategic perspective, but also invite in venture funds that have an interest in that. Why do venture funds have an interest in this? This is a relatively capitally efficient marketplace. You could exit to a major pretty simply. And the majors, I might add, if you go back to that slide, which I will now, oops. The majors are actually to a number. Every single one of those is a consolidated entity of a pharmaceutical company. So they get this notion of investing in early stage companies, of getting those strategic partnerships, and when it hits a certain stride to acquire the company. In terms of the research then, the best example in animal health is probably this NBAF project. NBAF is a critical national investment. It hits what is likely by all accounts deemed to be the most imminent threat to our nation's homeland security, meaning a biological attack perpetrated against a human population, a subway in New York, or a feedlot in Kansas. And imminent is defined by the Weapons of Mass Destruction Commission as between now and 2013. The nation, this very same commission, gives our nation a failing grade, just an F. For our ability to recognize, respond to, and recover from biological attack. Again, human population or agriculture. It's a big deal, and an awful lot of research capacity and capability in this particular area. We pursued this project with extraordinary vigor, not just because of our research capacity, but also the wind in the sails to our animal health companies. The very industries that would commercialize the vaccines developed out of this big lab are the very companies that are in this animal health corridor. So very high priority for us. I might add that there were 29 sites that were pursuing the NBAF to begin with, one of which was in just outside of, I might add, Madison, Wisconsin. It's a big project, $650 million, construction jobs, all of that. But really, I think the outcome of this is protecting American agriculture. As it relates to our case, what we did is, and this is something that economic development professionals understand implicitly, we didn't just say, hey, here's some money. What we articulated was something rather unique. It's a big investment, $650 million, imminent threat. What can we do to actually project a case that is just going to be so much better than anyone else's? Our business plan was relatively, if I can call it that, relatively simple. This lab won't be built until won't be completed until 2018. It will be started, it has started construction, but it will be started in terms of the lab itself next year. So our point was, failing grade, imminent threat, we've got to start this research program. There are 8 pathogens that can be researched. 5 can be researched in existing laboratories in Kansas. Why don't we fund? Cost share with the federal government. Why don't we fund and initiate research against those pathogens, those 5 pathogens, so when the NBAF is built, completed, commissioned, and ready, we can transition those people, those research plans, and those research programs into the NBAF. It's transition. Federal government brought it hook, line, and sinker. And absolutely fundamental and critical part of us winning this big lab. The animal health industry is certainly very important. And again, they want to collaborate with industry. DHS calls these vaccines countermeasures. Their word, not mine. But the very entities with extraordinary capability in vaccine production and manufacturing, many of them are in this corridor. Since the NBAF, it's sort of when you're in cluster dynamics, like many of you are. Since the NBAF, we've won 2 other big federal projects in the foreign animal disease realm: the Arthropod-Borne Animal Disease Research Laboratory, a USDA ARS program, and the Center for Emerging Zoonotic and Animal Diseases, a DHS program. That's the eminent scholar that I mentioned earlier. So the point is, once you get to a critical mass, on the research side and on the industry side, there's almost a gravitational pull that you begin to see, and I can fully expect that any future large-scale investment in these particular areas, we will certainly be a strong competitor. And I'll leave it at that. As I move away from research more to commercialization, I mentioned earlier that Kansas, by at least all accounts back in 2004 when the KBA was formed, is largely a flyover state. I mean, again, just zero in venture investment in bioscience companies. To be clear, rather substantial amount of venture investment in IT and other industry clusters, but zero in terms of the biosciences. And I'm also reminded that if you talk to an entrepreneur, they'll say, well, there's no venture capital. And if you talk to a venture investor, they'll say, well, there's no good deals. And so you'll get a feel for this in a second, but we actually attack both sides of that equation. And so we don't take one side or the other. We believe this sort of dual approach is absolutely critical. But nonetheless, we only have one native venture capital fund in the region. I might add that is an outpost office for a fund that is actually based in Illinois. I think most people could understand some of the other elements here. So, what we did, much like I think what a lot of other states are trying to do, is we took a big holistic view. What's it going to take to totally reverse this cycle? And I think one of the things we did is we took a good hard look at what other states had done, what other regions had done, and what has worked and what has failed. And this was really an important exercise for us. And so when I show you this, you may have seen something quite like this, or at least similar to it. But nonetheless, as you can well imagine, the big deal was actually how do you get venture firms to actually locate in Kansas? I mean, to set up an office in Kansas and to start kicking around deals and to actually, even more to the point, start investing in early stage companies. And more to the point, how do you ever get to the point where you can credibly project that? So as I said, we take sort of two sides of this approach, and if this thing will ever move on, again, if you talk to an entrepreneur, they'll say, well, there's no venture money. If you talk to a deal guy, a VC, they'll say, well, there's no good deals. We say and we do both. To be clear, both here is an internal organization managed by the KBA whose sole function is to de-risk early stage opportunities and to put deals in shape so they're more or less investable. And I know there will be lots of questions around this, but this is a critical function to the KBA and a rather important element of what we do. Our board sees this Heartland BioVentures as literally our highest priority. The second part of that, of course, is building a venture capital infrastructure. The KBA can invest directly. We do invest directly. But at some point, there's got to be another player there. The epiphany moment for us was when we took a look at a lot of other state programs and regional programs. We saw one of these or the other. So we saw lots of states with efforts that go off and grow small companies. That's great. But then there was no real effort around the venture capital piece. And we saw one state, which I can mention because I think most people know it, our neighbor to the east, that did the big growth in the venture capital area, but no effort to actually identify, foster, and put in shape, if you get my meaning, these early stage ventures. So, the combination of the two, in our opinion, was absolutely essential. So, Heartland BioVentures, HBV, as we call it internally. It's effectively our internal venture development team. And so these are individuals who are skilled in the various clusters that I mentioned earlier. They've got a background either from an investment perspective or a management perspective inside early stage companies in those clusters, not later stage companies. And they can provide credible assistance to these companies, leveraging their networks, leveraging their relationships and perspectives